Let's get into today's topic. Today's topic is money beliefs. I asked you guys to write down, last week, I asked you guys to write down 3 to 5 things that you learned from your parents or you heard from your parents about money. And then I said to ask yourself to circle the ones that you still, that you found yourself following. And then, let me see the third question, to ask yourself, how is the money story sabotaging your success? So, hi Kelly, or Kylie, I'm not sure how to say your name, but hi, thank you so much for joining and watching. So let's get into this. So I asked you guys to write these things down, and if you would like to share your money story, if you'd like some advice on your own money story and how you can overcome yours, please post it in the comments. If I don't see it during the live, I will come back and answer them. And if you're not comfortable posting in the group, you are always welcome to message me, and I will address things, your questions in the group or in future lives without saying your name or putting your business out there. You can reach me 2 ways. You can either, that's okay, sorry. So you can either message me through Facebook in the group, or you can email me at BTC, at coaches@breakthecyclecoaching.com. Kaylee, perfect. Kaylee, thank you for joining us. I know you're new to the group, Kaylee, so we had our first live of the year last week for Makeover Monday. You're welcome to go rewatch that, or you can just read the blog and it'll catch you up. So this week we're talking about those questions. Okay, so I told you guys I was going to go over the money beliefs that I learned from my parents, how they kind of affected me and my journey when I was still struggling financially, and how I've overcome them. And to give you guys a few tips on how you can do the same. Before we get too into that, I do want to talk about our weekly simple suggestion. It's a simple tip I'm giving each week to let people who feel overwhelmed when they have way too much information to start to really get back on track and take control of their finances. So last week's tip was to just track your spending. That's the first thing that you should be doing whenever you're trying to get out of a hole or save money or whatever it is you're doing. The first step is always track your spending. The second tip, I will say, real simple tip, is now that you've been tracking your spending, take a look at it and categorize it into 2 areas: wants versus needs. That's it. That's the tip. Categorize those trackings in wants versus needs, and we'll share another one next week. So let's dive in. All right, so my first money belief that I learned from my parents was you can't take it with you. Take out loans you don't have. I'll come back and look at the comments in just a minute. So you can't take it with you is something I learned from my mom. And she used to say it all the time. She goes, you might as well spend it now because you can't take it with you. This taught me a couple of things. One, it solidified having a paycheck to paycheck mentality for me, because if you can't take it with you, there's no sense in saving it, right? Because at the time we weren't thinking of the future, especially when you're young. You don't think about the future and what you're going to do when you're in your 60s or 70s and you're trying to retire and you're stuck trying to live off your kids now because you didn't save anything. So having the mindset or telling yourself the story that you can't take it with you is, I would say, a negative thing, because while you may not be able to take it with you, you absolutely can leave it for those you love. And that's important. Not because we want our kids to be spoiled or anything like that, but it helps, for one, not just to give your kids a better life, but you're gonna pass away, and wouldn't it be nice if things were taken care of for your kids or your family, and they didn't have to deal with another thing when they're trying to grieve you. And so you can't take it with you is definitely a dangerous money story to tell yourself. The effect it had on me, like I said, was it solidified the paycheck to paycheck mentality, and it really set me up into a space to not think about saving money. So for the longest time I had zero savings, and I lived paycheck to paycheck. The cause of this thinking was that my parents came from, we were poor, and that was pretty much it. My mom wasn't very educated, and my dad worked as hard as he could, but you only make so much money. And so that's a mindset like a lot of people that are like that have, and you can't take it with you. And so what's the point? But telling themselves that is dangerous, because it means that it's gonna cause them to stay exactly where they're at with that mentality. You definitely do not have to stay where you're at. There is always a way out. It may be through higher education, through job training, through savings. It's not always just don't spend money. Sometimes you need a bigger shovel to dig yourself out, right? So having the mentality of you can't take it with you, it can be very dangerous, and will cause you to be stuck in your situation for a very long time. It was definitely a negative. And how did I overcome it? So the way I overcome the you can't take it with you mentality was I started seeing and looking to the future. I started seeing that I didn't want to be in the same position my parents were in at retirement age. I didn't want to, I wanted my kids to be better off than I was. I didn't want them to suffer and to struggle like I did. And so I understood that I had to change things and set a better example for my kids. And so I stopped thinking that way. And it took a lot of time. I struggled with the paycheck to paycheck mentality for a super long time, just because I had lived like that for my entire life. A few ways you can get out of that is by, like I said, planning ahead, making goals. We talked about that last week, what kind of goals to make. Having goals is definitely the best way to get yourself out of that mentality, because it forces you to think further than today, further than this week, and further than this month and this year. And so you can't think short term if you're focusing on the future, right? So those are just a few tips I have if you have the money story of you can't take it with you. The second money story that I learned from my parents was money was the root of all evil. And I'm sure you've all heard this, because back in the 80s and 90s, you'd see these memes these movies of these like super villainous bad guys who were like all rich and dastardly, and money made you do evil things, and rich people were bad. And it was just, it was another story that we told ourselves because we didn't have those things. And so we didn't understand all the good things that you can do if you have money. Money is definitely not the root of all evil. If someone is evil, money is not going to change that. And if somebody is good, money is not going to change that. Not to say money doesn't cause problems if you're not treating it right, which is where I think a lot of that comes from. But the questions I asked myself for each of these, so let's answer those. What did this effect have? What effect did this have on me? I thought of money as a bad thing. It was never something that I looked to have. I didn't think it would help in any way. I didn't think that it would solve any of my problems. However, it absolutely would have. It would have helped me to not be in debt. It would have helped me to pay off loans sooner, and it would have helped me to be in an even better situation today than I am if I had done things earlier. If you don't know what compound interest is, we've talked about that, I think, in the group. If not, we'll do a post on it soon. And it kind of shows you how learning about money early can help you way in the long run versus learning about it later. So money is the root of all evil. What was the cause of this thinking? Again, this came from my parents, and we had aunts and uncles who made more money than I did, and my mom would say things like, oh, well, they just think they're hot stuff because, they can do this or they can do that, or must be nice. I now understand that, coming from a similar position that my aunt was in, that it's not true. Like, we are not rich. We are not living it up in the lab of luxury. We do take vacations and we do have nice things, but we're by no means rich, and we just manage our money correctly. And that could be said for lots of people who you may seem have money, but really they have just learned how to manage it better and how to budget correctly so that they can enjoy the things that they want in life versus someone who thinks money is the root of all evil and that it's just going to cause them a bunch of problems, and they don't see that money is simply a tool. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just a tool, and it's what you do with it that makes it good or bad. Dave Ramsey recently over Christmas gave away $1 million in one day. That doesn't sound evil to me at all. That sounds pretty dang amazing, and he definitely couldn't have done that without having that money, right? And he's not hurting for money giving that money away. So just to show you how much money he does have, it's not evil. It can be done. Good things can be done with money. We see this in donations we can make to Australia and other places, the Amazon, and all these places that have disasters. Tell those people that money is the root of all evil. It's really the only thing that can help them, fight things that they have. Let's see, was this positive or negative thinking? So this was definitely a negative thinking. Again, money is not evil or good. It is just a tool, and what you do with it is what you do with it. How did I overcome this thinking? I overcame this thinking because I learned that, because of actually another thing I'll talk about later, I learned how good it felt to give. A few years back when Adam was in working offshore and I felt like we had an abundance, I would go and I would hide money places and put things to where I knew it was going to find the right person and it was going to help somebody that really needed it. I would buy dinners for people at restaurants, and I would pay it forward in lines, and I would buy sandwiches and I would buy Long Johns and soup for homeless people outside, because I could at the time, and it was something that I felt really good about doing. And so again, I couldn't do this without money, right? When I didn't have money and I was broke all the time and I wasn't managing my money correctly, I never had enough money to be able to give. And once we learned how to manage our money better and make better money choices, I suddenly had this money that was extra that I could give to others and help others with. And it was a truly life-changing experience for me. I've told this story before, so some of you may have heard it, some of you may have not. But while I was doing this and during this time frame, I walked into my local Publix one day, and I wasn't doing it that day. And I had this gentleman tap me on the shoulder and walk by me, and I was kind of startled, and I looked down and he had put money in my cart. So I was like, "Sir, you dropped this." He goes, No, that's for you. God told me you needed it. And I said, "Oh no, that's not me. I don't need it. Please give it to somebody else who does." I was like, "I do this for other people. I appreciate it, but no, thank you." And he says to me, "No, you don't understand. God sees what you're doing. He wants you to keep doing it. Please continue what you're doing." Y'all, I was speechless. I had goosebumps. I was shaking, and I about started crying right there in Publix. I'm not a super religious person, but I was very, very caught by the Spirit, I guess you could say, in that moment. And that's when I knew that money was absolutely not the root of all evil, and that by being good stewards of our money, we are able to help others in a bigger and better way than we can when we are not being careful and making good money decisions. The third thing that I was told is there is nothing you can do about collections. So my mom used to have this thing where she would dodge collectors, and so she would hang up on the calls, she would do all these things. And so I took that with me into my early adulthood. And when I had a collection, I would do the same thing. I would dodge the people. I would, anything I could do not to talk to them, I did, because I couldn't pay the money. So what's the point, right? They're not going to bleed a turnip. I didn't have it. Let's answer these questions. What effect did that have on me? Well, honestly, it made my credit score really bad. It put me in a lot of debt, and it definitely derailed any plans I had at the time to do anything good. It's really hard to move forward buying a house or buying a car or any of the things that you need to do when you have collections. And so I was doing nothing but damaging myself during that time frame. And I was really young. 18 to 22 when this was happening. That follows you for a really, really long time. Yeah, Lysandra, it is horrible, right? But it's the things that we don't understand or that we don't know. And we're just following, the example that was set for us. by older people, because that's what we learned from, because money, it's not taught in households, and we don't talk about it as family. It's always, for the longest time, been a taboo subject not to talk about money. And so I'm so glad that in these days that is changing, and we're being more open about our, not just our money, but our mental health and like all of these other things, because there are people there who have shopping addictions, and it's a mental thing, and it's just like any other addiction. And now that people are able to more freely talk about things, I really think we're turning in a society in a way that we're all going to be better, and I'm super excited for that. So what was the cause of this thinking? Again, I watched my parents do it, and so I thought that was the way it was done. You can't bleed a turnip, so if they couldn't get it, then I didn't have to pay it. And I never saw the consequences of it when I was younger, and so I didn't learn what those consequences were until I was in this situation myself. So not knowing and being ignorant of what happens when you go into collections, I just assumed it would be fine. And later I learned it definitely was not. It was definitely a negative for sure. And how did I overcome it? Well, I got smart. I realized I was done being a victim. I was done with the bad money situation. I was tired of having collectors call me all the time. I was tired of being embarrassed about my low credit score. I was sick of never being able to be on any sort of credit application with Adam. I was mad that I couldn't be on my last house because my credit was so bad. I had to have co-signers for everything I did. It was very embarrassing and humbling to be in that position as an adult and be in the space where you're supposed to be able to handle things, but yet you can't do super important things without somebody else's help. And to me, I've always been a very, very independent person, and that was probably the lowest that I've been, is when I was not able to take care of myself financially because of those beliefs. And so once I got tired of that and I learned there was a better way, I definitely changed the way I handle things. I learned to talk to my collectors. I set up payment plans. I worked on paying them off. And then I just let time do its thing, and eventually they fell off my credit after I had paid them. And things were good. I had student loans that were in default. Medical bills in default. There were so many, and it was such a bad time. But I can look back at it now and think, okay, that was a good lesson to learn, because now I know I don't want my children to go through that, and I can teach them better and teach them better money stories. The next thing I learned from my parents was basic budgeting is good enough. Now, what basic budgeting is when you take the amount of money that you get each paycheck, you subtract your bills, and whatever's left is play money. It's free, and you can do whatever you want with it. That's your going out to eat money. That's your going out with your friends' money. That's fun money, right? So what effect did this have on me? Well, again, paycheck to paycheck mentality, because when you get it, you spend it, it's gone. And then you're left with a short week, and you're struggling right before payday because you don't have any money because you spent it all on whatever, right? And you have something come up, or you need food, or your kids need something, and you don't have it because you didn't put it aside. What was the cause of this thinking? Again, watching my parents. Like, it's so amazing to me, and I've been talking about this with my therapist lately, is all of the things that we bring with us into adulthood that we didn't realize that we get from our parents, and that we pass on to our own children. And it's not just by the words that we say or what we tell them, it's the things that we're doing, and the way we act towards them, and the way we respond to things, and the actions that we do that they're watching. Like, they're watching us do all these things, and they're absolutely going to take it with them too. So I really try to be mindful of the things that I'm passing on to my kids, whether through speech or action, because I don't want them to come back in their 30s and almost 40s and be like, oh, I learned this horrible thing from my mom, this is why I am this way, and then having to work to overcome it. So I definitely learned it from my parents and their things. Was it positive or negative? It's kind of a neutral thing. At least I can say, at least my mom budgeted for the most part. Usually bills got paid, not all the time. There's definitely times where we, were kicked out and had to be, go live with family or friends or had to move quickly or whatever. And so going through the questions that we learned or that I am asking for each of these is, what effect did this have on me? Not much, because I was never one to learn to buy things that I couldn't afford. For one, because I'd ruined my credit enough with, bad payments that I couldn't get a credit card. And so it didn't really affect me that much. At least we didn't have to run out. Yeah, that's true. And then let's see, what was the cause of this thinking? Just watching my parents do the same thing. My dad would put tools on credit for work. My mom would put home decor on credit, furniture on credit. Just about anything was before we got cut off. Okay. Oh, at least we didn't have to run out. Okay, I gotcha. Thank you for that. My memory sucks and I don't remember what I was talking about, but that's okay. We'll move forward. So was it positive or negative? So for me, it was neither, because like I said, it didn't really affect me to that much of an extent. I could definitely see where it could have affected me, and the fact that it would have caused me to get into more debt that I maybe could get out of control, because that's what happens with a lot of people, is they get into so much credit card debt trying to live above their means that they really find it hard to dig themselves out. And then they get into this state of, upset, and they don't really know where to go, and they get kind of like panicky, like, do I need to, they start thinking about bankruptcy and all these other things, when it's not necessary to go bankrupt just because you're in credit card debt. You always can get out of it. A lot of people will also pay money to people to fix their credit, right, and to help them negotiate prices with their creditors. You don't need to do that. You can absolutely do all those things yourself. And so it can get us into a lot of trouble with that thinking. So this is one I didn't really have to overcome, like I said, because it wasn't really an issue for me. The next two that I have, money stories that I heard from my parents, were pretty good ones, actually. The first one was from my dad. Actually, both of these were from my dad, and one was from both my mom and my dad. So the first one, the positive one, was never buy a new car, always buy used. And my dad used to tell me this for several reasons. One, because a new car was going to lose its value as soon as it went off the lot. Two, because an older car was easier to work on, and he was a mechanic, and so he always had a better time with it, and he just, he thought, get all the money you could out of it. And so that was really good. And I can say I've never bought a new car. My mom bought me a new car when I was 16, and then told me, hey, here, make the payments. And so that was bad, because that caused me to work a lot as a kid, probably more than I should have, and my grades definitely slipped because I had this payment I had to make. And I had the car when I had my young daughter, and eventually I had to let it go because I couldn't afford the payment as a single mom. And so that was a negative, and that kind of taught me and reinforced the never buy a new car. And I haven't since. Every car I've owned has been used, and we've gotten good deals on them, and we've loved them, and they've lasted for a really long time. And so that's been a really positive for me. Would it be nice to have a new car? I guess. As long as they're new to me, I think they're great. So to answer these questions, what effect did this have on me? The effect it had on me was that I learned how to be more frugal, and I learned my first positive lesson in finances: never, always buy for, a good deal. What was the cause of my thinking? My dad never owned a new car in his life. In fact, he had the biggest junkers you've ever seen, and he drove them and fixed them up until he could not drive them anymore. And I was the kid who asked to get dropped off around the block because I was embarrassed of the clunkers we drove. But looking at it now, he did the best he could, and he taught me a really good lesson with that. And so I'm really grateful and proud of those clunkers that we drove now, looking back. Was it a positive or negative? That was definitely a positive thing that I learned. And how did I overcome it? I didn't need to. It was something that helped me. And so our money stories don't always have to be negative things we've learned from our parents. They can also be absolutely positive things we learned from our parents. None of this I want you guys to think is about putting our parents down for the things that they've showed us, because they did the best that they could, and they didn't know any better either. They didn't learn from their parents. You know, like I said, money's always been something that's been not talked about. And so they didn't know how to teach us about it because they had never learned about it. And so, you know, that's why we call ourselves Break the Cycle, because it's exactly what it is. Money is a cycle in families and with our children and in society. And we get on these cycles and we start and we tell ourselves these stories because we heard them from our parents, or we heard them from our grandparents, or we saw them in, you know, the news or in society, or we saw how people spent money, or, you know, we were told to buy all this stuff. It is this repetitive cycle, and we tell ourselves over and over and over again. And until we get out of that mindset, we can never really change our legacies and never change our stories. And so it's really important that we know where we're coming from so that we can go where we want to go. Because if you don't change your money stories, and if you don't learn from your money stories, you're never going to be able to move forward into having a better life, and leaving your children or your family a financial legacy. It's going to be hard for you to get out of debt. It's going to be hard for you to save money. And you're going to end up, you know, in the same place you started, because you continue to believe the same money stories that your parents believed. And, you know, so I challenge you with your own money stories to ask yourselves these questions. What effect did it have on you? What was the cause of your thinking? Was it a positive or a negative? And how will you overcome it? So I'm going to pose you to ask these questions to overcome your money stories. Again, does it have a positive effect on you? I want you to identify a few situations where you can clearly identify where this story held you back or moved you forward. So what is the situation that you faced in your past that you can clearly identify a money story that you were taught or believed, and how did it affect that situation? Okay. So for example, I'll give you one of my own. When I was trying to think, when I was in my early 20s, I had went to school, and I had a lot of student loan debt, and I had put it on deferment and things like that. And because I never thought about budgeting my money, I never thought about taking money with me or anything like that, I just thought it would work itself out. And so I definitely can see how that money story held me back in those situations. How could I have handled differently? I could have paid my bills on time. And what ended up happening was they started deducting money from my check. And that was money I didn't already have. Like I said, I was a single mom. I didn't know how I was going to move forward. I ended up having to work like 4 jobs at the time just to be able to make ends meet, because they were taking money on my check. Because here's the thing. Once you go so far back, the government no longer cares what your situation is. Private loan companies don't care what your situation is. They're going to get their money. And it doesn't matter if you can feed your family or not. And so that was definitely a very big learning situation for me. The next question I want you to ask yourself is, what advice would you give someone that's going through the same situation that you faced now? What would you tell them? My guess would be that you would have learned your lesson from what you went through, and you can give them better advice, right? However, hindsight is 20/20, and look to your situations now, and every time that you are thinking about, you know, oh, I need this, or I can't save that, or I can't do this, or whatever it is, see if any of your money stories are stopping you or holding you back from reaching the next level of your financial journey. You know, are they stopping you from saving money? Are they stopping you from paying off debts? Are you a victim to your circumstances? Do things just happen to you? If they do, it's probably a money story, and you should really, really take a look at that and see how you can overcome it. Because until you do, you're going to keep repeating the same cycles over and over again. And so I hope this has encouraged you and given you some some things to think about, and you can use it as a tool going forward in your journey to change yourself financially. I'll be writing a blog post on this to kind of summarize everything. And sharing it tomorrow. If you missed the early part of the live, we launched our website today. I'm super excited about that. We're going to have a weekly blog. Right now it's going to be based on the weekly conversations we have in the group to solidify that and to get that message out to more people. We're going to have courses on finances. Right now we have one in there. Kaylee, you don't need to watch it yet because you're actually going to be able to watch that in the upcoming module in Passion and Profit. But for those of you who have not seen it, please go check it out. It's not very long. It's maybe about an hour.